Welcome back to Superbly Said, Advanced English Vocabulary and Phrases. Today's critique examines a SpeakDuo lesson slide deck aimed at intermediate and advanced English learners.
And quickly, you can go to SpeakDuo.com to meet new people from around the world who are practicing English on video calls to become more confident with their English speaking abilities.
Right, so a key theme running through this material seems to be the ambition to engage advanced learners. But let's look at how the introductory framing aligns with the actual content.
The lesson's core theme lacks a clear, logical thread connecting the introductory video content to the specific vocabulary expressions being taught.
Yeah, I'm really glad we are starting right here. Because, the opening of any educational material sets the psychological stage.
It really does. And when you look at the sequence of the slide deck, it's quite jarring.
Exactly. The material opens with a video titled Hudson Williams Teaches Jimmy a Hockey Stretch. But then right after that, the slides immediately pivot to teaching idioms like staying in character, getting picked up, and bailing on someone.
Right. Completely different vibe.
It feels a bit like tuning in for a sports documentary and suddenly being handed a script for a Hollywood drama. I wonder if this juxtaposition is intentional to keep learners on their toes?
That's clearly laid out. I wonder, though, if we've considered how this disconnect might cause cognitive dissonance for the learner. The weakness here is that the extreme thematic gap between a hockey stretching video and idioms rooted in the entertainment industry or just general social situations, it significantly weakens the immersion.
Oh, absolutely. It prevents the learner from using the video as a contextual anchor. And contextual anchors are like everything in language acquisition.
Precisely. Because when you watch a video about a hockey stretch, your brain subconsciously primes itself for sports vocabulary, physical exertion, that sort of thing.
The neural pathways are all lit up for that specific semantic field.
Yeah, but then the very next slide introduces an expression like to get picked up in the context of television networks. Or a deer in headlights. You just collapse that cognitive bridge.
The learner has to completely discard the visual context they just absorbed. So the suggestion here is to realign the vocabulary to match the video's theme, or replace the video to serve as a proper thematic umbrella for the chosen idioms.
Let's look at some concrete examples for that. If the author genuinely wishes to keep the hockey stretch video, they could simply swap the vocabulary list for sports-related idioms.
Like drop the gloves or stretch the truth.
Exactly, or skating on thin ice. That way, the physical action in the video directly maps to the metaphorical meaning.
And conversely, if they want to keep the current list of idioms, they should replace the hockey video with something that naturally generates those phrases, like a behind-the-scenes interview with actors discussing how hard it is to stay in character.
Or a funny sitcom scene where someone bails on a friend at the last minute. It's all about creating a seamless universe for the student.
Assuming the author updates the thematic umbrella, let's look closely at the section discussing the vocabulary itself, because the execution here has a few notable bumps.
The execution of the vocabulary examples presents significant editorial errors and misses an opportunity to demonstrate the nuanced contextual application required for advanced fluency.
Which is a crucial area to refine, because when you are targeting advanced learners, the margin for error is incredibly slim.
Right, these students already have a strong foundation. They want precision.
So, looking at the specific definitions and example sentences, there is a glaring error for expression 7. The meaning of to get picked up is correctly defined as a show being renewed. But the example sentence provided is, his angry reaction to the small joke was completely over the top.
Yeah, that's clearly a copy-paste error. And for an advanced learner, trying to parse the syntactic usage, an unrelated example sentence just causes intense frustration.
Beyond that literal mismatch, the weakness is that the practice questions broadly lack depth. Asking, what embarrassing situation made you look like a deer in headlights recently? It just forces the student to parrot the phrase.
Is there a risk that focusing solely on these basic fill-in-the-blank style questions might overlook the needs of an advanced or intermediate learner?
I think so. The suggestion is, after correcting the mismatched sentences, elevate the practice sections by asking learners to compare similar phrases and apply the idioms to specific, high-stakes, real-world scenarios.
Let's break down some concrete examples. First, fix the error for expression 7. A proper sentence for to get picked up would be, the pilot episode was so well received that the series got picked up for a full season.
Perfect. And to add that advanced value, we need to rewrite the practice prompts. Let's demonstrate this with the 8 specific phrases the authors chose, comparing them to simpler alternatives.
Okay, let's start with to sink in. An intermediate student already knows the basic alternative, which is to understand.
Right, but the nuanced difference of to sink in implies a delay in comprehension, usually because the information is shocking or incredibly complex.
Exactly. So an advanced example would be, imagine describing a complex new policy your boss introduced at work. You wouldn't just say you understood it. You'd say, the new corporate compliance rules were so dense, it took a few days for them to really sink in before I could draft the transition plan.
That's a great workplace scenario. What about a deer in headlights? The basic synonym is just being surprised or startled.
The advanced nuance is total paralysis. You are completely frozen by that surprise.
So if you were giving an IELTS Speaking Part 2 response about a difficult interview, you might say, when the interviewer asked me to explain the gap in my resume, I didn't just feel surprised, I was caught like a deer in headlights, unable to form a single sentence.
Yeah, that shows real pragmatic competence. Now let's look at to stay in character. The simple alternative is to act naturally or pretend.
But the nuance is continuously maintaining a very specific fictional role or professional persona, despite interruptions.
So a workplace example might be dealing with a terribly rude client. You could say, even though the customer was screaming, I managed to stay in character as the polite, helpful manager the entire time.
Exactly. Next phrase is to tease something. An intermediate learner might just say to announce or to show.
But teasing something is deliberately revealing a remarkably small amount of information to build curiosity.
Right. So imagine a meeting with your marketing colleagues. You'd say, we decided to tease the new product launch on social media with just a silhouette, rather than revealing the whole design at once.
That's a perfect business context. Let's talk about to censor yourself. The basic idea is just being quiet or not speaking.
But the advanced nuance is carefully stopping yourself from openly saying something offensive or inappropriate. It takes active effort.
So, talking to your boss, you could say, during that incredibly tense board meeting, I really had to censor myself to avoid criticizing the CEO's terrible proposal.
Perfect. Next is to embrace something. The simple synonym is to accept.
But embracing something means completely and enthusiastically accepting a brand new idea or a tough challenge.
Like an IELTS prompt about overcoming a challenge. You could answer, instead of complaining about the sudden transition to remote work, I decided to fully embrace the new software and master it.
Nice. We already covered the TV definition of to get picked up, but in a corporate context, the simpler phrase is to continue.
Yeah, getting picked up implies an official choice by a higher authority to renew something. So you could say to a colleague, after our successful pitch, the pilot program got picked up for a second round of funding by the executive team.
Excellent. And finally, to bail on someone. The intermediate word is to cancel.
But bailing on someone carries the nuance of surprisingly and very suddenly canceling plans you already made, often leaving the person in a tough spot.
Right. So complaining to a coworker, you might say, I had to finish the entire quarterly report alone because John bailed on me at the absolute last minute.
These comparisons really elevate the material. Once those practice questions are elevated, we have to consider how the student is navigating the platform itself.
Right, the user experience.
I can see what you're going for here. Let's see how we can strengthen this. Perhaps the author placed this at the front as a hook to show the value of the SpeakDuo Pro app right away?
That makes sense, but could the evidence also support a different conclusion, like prioritizing the immediate learning experience over the platform features?
The placement of highly specific, personalized AI feedback at the very beginning of the slide deck disrupts the structural flow and may confuse the learner's initial focus.
Yes. The document immediately introduces AI feedback on grammar, like, your original sentence is quite disorganized.
And pronunciation corrections with timestamps, like 0046, before the lesson even starts.
Which is wild, because the student hasn't even spoken yet.
The weakness is that presenting post-lesson analytics before the student has entered the breakout rooms creates a chronological disconnect. It breaks the immersion.
The student logs in, ready to learn, and boom, they are told their sentence is disorganized.
They'll just think, wait, am I being graded already?
So the suggestion is to reposition the specific AI feedback examples and the promotional app features to the end of the lesson, framing them as a clear next steps or post-lesson analysis section.
For concrete examples, move the grammar, pronunciation, and start free trial slides to right before the thanks for coming slide.
And frame it like, here is the kind of personalized feedback you will receive after participating in today's breakout rooms.
That keeps the focus on acquiring the idioms first and demonstrates the value of the app organically at the end.
Speaking of acquiring the idioms, I think it's time we test how well these concepts have sunk in.
Yes. Let's conduct a quick quiz on the 8 phrases we just covered. We'll give you 3 options, A, B, and C.
What is the best definition for the expression to sink in?
Option A, to finally be fully comprehended or deeply realized within the mind only after a specific amount of time passes by.
Option B, to rapidly descend into a state of extreme emotional distress immediately following a surprisingly tragic incident.
Or option C, to permanently hide highly sensitive financial records from federal corporate tax investigators prior to the audit.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct answer is option A, to finally be fully comprehended or deeply realized within the mind only after a specific amount of time passes by.
Remember our example about the dense new corporate policy taking a few days to sink in? That delay is key to the phrase, to sink in.
All right, next question. How is the idiom a deer in headlights accurately defined?
Is it option A, a highly secretive strategy utilized by senior executives to easily bypass remarkably strict corporate safety rules?
Option B, a specific person who is completely paralyzed by an intense feeling of sudden surprise, deep fear, or bad confusion?
Or option C, a significantly prolonged and intensely bitter physical argument between 2 deeply divided rival political groups?
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The answer is option B, a specific person who is completely paralyzed by an intense feeling of sudden surprise, deep fear, or bad confusion.
Just like our IELTS example, where the candidate was frozen like a deer in headlights when asked about a resume gap, that total paralysis defines a deer in headlights.
Question 3. If someone manages to stay in character, what exactly happens to them?
Option A, to completely avoid interacting with surprisingly hostile colleagues during a remarkably stressful corporate retreat.
Option B, to successfully persuade a deeply reluctant individual to totally accept a highly unconventional professional offer.
Or option C, to continuously act or behave exactly like the fictional role you are playing despite any unexpected interruptions.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct choice is option C, to continuously act or behave exactly like the fictional role you are playing despite any unexpected interruptions.
Like our example of dealing with a screaming client while managing to stay in character as the polite manager. Maintaining that persona is what it means to stay in character.
Question 4. What does a person do when they decide to tease something?
Option A, to deliberately reveal a remarkably small amount of information in order to make people significantly more curious.
Option B, to physically detach a heavy wooden object from its original metal frame to secretly access a highly guarded room.
Or option C, to brutally insult a highly respected senior manager directly during an incredibly tense and serious board meeting.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The answer is option A, to deliberately reveal a remarkably small amount of information in order to make people significantly more curious.
Think back to our marketing colleagues deciding to tease something by just showing a silhouette of the new product. Building that curiosity is how you tease something.
Halfway there? Question 5. Which of the following describes what it means to censor yourself?
Option A, to entirely forget a highly important professional presentation right as you are actively standing upon the stage.
Option B, to carefully stop yourself from openly saying something that is offensive or completely inappropriate to the crowd.
Or option C, to aggressively demand an immediate, sincere apology after an exceptionally hostile and highly stressful interaction.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
It's option B, to carefully stop yourself from openly saying something that is offensive or completely inappropriate to the crowd.
This is exactly like having to censor yourself to avoid yelling at the CEO during that tense board meeting we talked about. Holding back your true thoughts is to censor yourself.
Question 6. What occurs when a person decides to embrace something?
Option A, to immediately express profound public outrage when directly facing a completely unexpected and deeply unfair rule.
Option B, to violently physically restrict an aggressive individual from entirely ruining a highly formal business gathering.
Or option C, to completely and very enthusiastically accept a brand new idea, a major transition, or a highly tough challenge.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct answer is option C, to completely and very enthusiastically accept a brand new idea, a major transition, or a highly tough challenge.
Remember the remote work transition example? Choosing to fully embrace something means diving in enthusiastically, rather than just tolerating it.
Question 7. What does it mean for a television show to get picked up?
Option A, to be officially chosen to continue production or to be completely renewed for another season by the main network.
Option B, to efficiently completely utilize a remarkably great initial idea to make much further progress on an old project.
Or option C, to systematically completely ignore all highly complicated professional advice provided by the senior team experts.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
It is option A, to be officially chosen to continue production or to be completely renewed for another season by the main network.
We highlighted this when correcting the author's error. Whether it's a TV show or project funding, when it is officially renewed, it manages to get picked up.
And our final question, what is the underlying meaning of the expression to bail on someone?
Option A, to forcefully, entirely dismantle a massive business structure before fully recreating it from the very deep roots.
Option B, to surprisingly and very suddenly completely cancel the personal plans you initially made with someone beforehand.
Or option C, to successfully, securely place an extremely heavy metal object perfectly upon the absolute highest shelf available.
Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The answer is option B, to surprisingly and very suddenly completely cancel the personal plans you initially made with someone beforehand.
Like our example where John decided to bail on someone by leaving his coworker to finish the quarterly report all alone. That sudden cancellation is what it means to bail on someone.
That wraps up the quiz portion. It really shows how much nuance these advanced phrases hold.
It really does. And that brings us to the end of our analysis today. Let's briefly recap our 3 main actionable takeaways for the author. First, address the thematic cohesion by either aligning the introductory video theme with the specific vocabulary chosen or swapping the video to match the current idioms.
Right, ensuring a solid cognitive anchor for the learner. Second, correct the mismatched example sentence for getting picked up, and elevate all the practice questions.
That force the learner to engage with the nuanced differences between the idioms and their basic synonyms.
And third, resolve the chronological disconnect by moving the personalized AI feedback and promotional slides to the end of the document. Frame them as a post-lesson analysis to preserve the initial immersion.
These are entirely solvable structural and editorial adjustments. We warmly invite the author to implement these changes, refine the prompts, and submit the revised SpeakDuo lesson plan back in for another critique.
We would absolutely love to see how the material evolves, because teaching an advanced language requires every element to work together in harmony.
Exactly. Make sure the environment you create perfectly matches the precise advanced skills your learners are trying to build. Thank you for listening to this critique.